All right, sometimes, guys, I'm just bored, have too much time to think, and I just get ideas that I think are really good, and I just want to share sometimes. So I think I'm gonna start doing that. Sometimes they'll be about, hey, I think a game studio should do this, or I think that this should be a TV show. Or sometimes it'll just be random stuff about the universe, and that's what this first video is going to be about. So, what I was sitting around thinking about was this whole idea of entropy. And I remember in thermodynamics is the study of phase changes. So, like, hey, your water turns into steam, and thinking about all the energy that's associated with those phase changes and what we can do with that to, like, making HVAC systems or a refrigerator or a heat pump, things like that. That's what thermodynamics is. But a big topic in thermodynamics is this idea of entropy, and it's so difficult to understand. I remember taking the class and just being like, "What is this guy talking about?" And from a high level perspective, from a qualitative standpoint, entropy is nothing more than the measurement of disorder, which doesn't seem like something that you can measure, but I'll get to how it is measured in a little bit. But it is measured, and it's important because it explains why things happen in some directions and not in others, even when it would conserve energy. Like, there's a reason why if you have a hot glass of, I don't know, coffee, it cools down and releases heat into the environment, as opposed to if you have a room temperature cup of water, it doesn't get hot from the room temperature, even though that would be a conservation of energy. If, hey, thermal energy from the room just decided to go into the cup of water, that would be a conservation of energy, but that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen because that would be decreasing entropy, and entropy is always increasing. That's the way that reactions go. They go in the direction that increases entropy. Again, it's a measurement of disorder. So in that coffee example, let's think about what thermal energy is. It's you have your molecules moving really rapidly, right? Well, and they have kinetic energy, but on that molecular scale, we interpret that as thermal energy, right? And they can transmit that thermal energy through heat. And if you have your hot thing of coffee, right? All your thermal energy is super duper dense and compact and concentrated. It's very concentrated to your cup as opposed to being shared with the whole room. So it's very ordered in the fact that, hey, all that thermal energy is in one small volume of space, but the way the universe works is entropy increases. So that's going to spread to the room, and that's more disorderly because, hey, now the thermal energy is everywhere and it's harder to keep track of. What's really interesting about this, though, is it's not just, oh, I guess things just become more disorderly and that's the way the universe is. I mean, yes, but it's a statistics thing. Like, it it would technically be possible. It would technically be possible for that cup of water, that room temperature cup of water, to start just getting warmer. But that's so unlikely for that to happen. How I like to think of it is, like, imagine you have like a grid of just like 100 like ping pong balls just on a table or something, and you start shaking one. That's like a molecule with thermal energy. It's going to start bumping into the other ones, and it's going to just statistically, it's going to randomly start bumping all of them, and they're all going to start bumping around, and all that kinetic energy that was in the one is going to be spread out throughout all of them through the collisions. It would technically be possible for you to start shaking one and just that one in a trillion chance that you bounce it and then it hits another one, but then somehow the vectors bounce back so that all the kinetic energy comes back to the original one. Or think about if all the ping pong balls were bouncing around, I guess it would be possible that all of them collide in a way that they all hit one single one of the ping pong balls, and that ping pong ball gets all the energy and becomes has a lot of kinetic energy now and is super hot, right? That's technically possible, I guess. So if we think about our cup of water, it is technically possible that all the molecules in the air, right, all collide in one way, just randomly, and it heats up the cup of water. That is so statistically unlikely. I don't even know if I can like describe how statistically unlikely. Yeah, I don't think I can convey to you how statistically impossible that is. So that's kind of why entropy exists, and this is how it's determined in thermodynamics. Specifically, this heat transfer one is what I'm talking about. Q is your amount of heat transfer. Again, heat is the transfer of thermal energy, the transfer of kinetic energy on a molecular scale. And temperature, I like to think of as like the average thermal energy of a body. That's not technically true, but it's true enough to kind of visualize what I'm talking about. Basically, if you're transferring thermal energy, so your Q, if you have some heat transfer, but you're doing it over a constant temperature, then your like average thermal energy is staying the same, but you're transferring thermal energy within that system, and so you're creating more disorder because you're kind of changing that distribution of the average. By distributing what you have in a more disordered fashion, if that makes sense. But where things really get weird is your change in entropy. So your entropy going in minus the entropy you have going out. You think that this equals the change in entropy, but you actually get entropy generated. So the weird thing about entropy is you gain entropy just by doing whatever action you did. It's not something that's conserved, it's something that generates. So even if we can actually perform an action that has like a net, like the net entropy of the system is negative. So we've actually created something more ordered. So for instance, if we freeze water into ice, we made the molecules more ordered. That is a net decrease. That's a system net decrease in entropy, but even doing that, we still get a generation of entropy, if that makes sense. So like our Sn minus S out will not equal the delta S. The delta S will be slightly more because just by doing stuff, we create entropy. So this gets to what I was really thinking about with entropy is entropy is always increasing just by existing, by doing things, by doing reactions, by just existing. We're generating entropy. Yeah, it's always going up, and so it's kind of directly tied to time because let's wait like 5 seconds or something like that. 5 seconds ago, there was less entropy in the universe than there is right now, and even as we're speaking right now, the total entropy in the universe is going up and it can't go down. So if time is always going forward and entropy is always going up, then your time and entropy are kind of tied together in that way. You could almost, if there was a way to measure all the entropy in the universe and actively see it going up in real time, that would be an absolute way to count time in the universe. Because I'll also think about like the whole idea of the Big Bang, right? Things starting to exist and all that. That's disorder. That's things becoming more disordered as opposed to before the Big Bang. But I mean, we don't know what before the Big Bang was, but things started expanding. So if we think about it in reverse, at that very start of time, things were a lot more ordered because everything didn't exist. Which is just really weird to think about. It also gets me thinking about like time travel and all those kind of things. Because like think about someone traveling back in time, like in a movie. They're traveling to a state of less total entropy in the universe. Like if you had your entropy counter, like I was imagining, and you go back in time, there would be less entropy. There'd be less entropy in the universe. To go back in time, you'd have to be destroying entropy, and maybe vice versa is true. To destroy entropy, you have to like go back in time. The reason why I got to think about this week is I was trying to do like a DIY heat pump thing, and I wanted it to be able to reverse itself. So I wanted it to be able to heat and also cool. And there's this one part of it called like an expansion valve, or in this case a capillary tube, and what I wanted was to make my system symmetrical so that I could have it cooling in one way and have it working in one direction and the temperature be warm on one side and cool on the other, and then flip it, and then it's just all flipped so that I can have the cooling on this side and the heating on the other side, for instance. And I was just arguing with ChatGPT because it said even that if you made it identical, it's not going to behave the same way. It's going to not be the same, and you need two different size capillary tubes. And that did not make sense to me, because what do you mean I make every single thing in the system the exact same from left to right? I just say, hey, now go the other direction, and now it's not going to work? Like, that doesn't make sense. But what it was explaining is the whole refrigeration cycle, right, works on the fact that you're exploiting a refrigerant's ability to change phase and the energy that you can use from that. But we said that in thermodynamics, entropy is important, and it tells you the direction that things are going, and it's very important for phase changes, especially. So when you reverse the cycle and you have the phase changes, right, going in this direction, but then you reverse it and have it go in the other, it's not going to work the same way in reverse because it's like the system. It's almost like memory. Because the total entropy of the system has increased. When you go the other direction, it's not going to behave the same way. It's like it knows that you reversed it, and so it literally can't behave the same way. And then if you were to unreverse it, it's not going to work the same way as the first time you had it running. It's really strange to think about, but it got me thinking, like, maybe that's an explanation for how memory works in organisms and also like decision making as well. Because what I was seeing with this refrigeration thing is you can't solve for what your capillary sizing should be. You can't just outright solve for it analytically. There is an answer for it, but it's non-linear, which means that you can't just solve it. You can plug something in and realize, hey, wow, that works. That's the answer. But you can't solve for it, and there might be multiple answers too. So that kind of relates to like organisms being able to make decisions for themselves, like for individuals. There's not a right answer, really. Like, you can't say, oh, I 100% know what that squirrel is going to do when this thing happens. Like, you can't generalize that to every individual, because it can have its own solution to something. Kind of similar to how that refrigeration system I was talking about could have a different capillary sizing for one direction, and then a different one for another direction, and then a different one for when you go back to that first direction. So yeah, it's really weird stuff to think about. But yeah, those are my, I guess, ideas. Let me know what y'all think. If y'all think I'm cooking, if you think I'm crazy, I'll read the comments. But yeah, got too much time on my hands, I guess. Thank y'all for watching.